How you doing? Thank you. Good. Good morning. You want to do me a favor? Pass these out. This should be enough for everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
This is a hard one, huh?
What?
This is a hard one.
I brought a special thing. I'm not going to try to do this. I gave up on that a long time ago. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah. I'll tell you in a minute. I hope it works. Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
How you doing? Hi, Cheryl. How you doing? Good morning, Maestro. All right, good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Certainly wonderful to see you all. Good morning. Good morning to everybody on the screen. I hope you all got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and watched the Royal Chasana, right? So in case we haven't said it yet, on behalf of Valley Beth Shalom, the Jewish community of Encino and Tarzana, we want to wish Mazel Tov, many years of happiness and joy to the royal couple, to Herschel and to Megan, and Malka, right? Taka Malka Epis, right? And to her parents, Thomas Markle, the Ganef in Mexico, and Diana Ragland is her mother, who looked very good this morning on the TV, and of course to his father, the future king, right, Prince Charles. You don't think so? No. You're betting against it, huh? And to his mother, a blessed memory, of course. Who would have talked? She would have liked this. I mean, she would have dug this wedding, right? And it was a night. Did you see the wedding? It was a nice chasana epis. It was really nice, right? It was really beautiful. No, of course not. What am I, Meshuggah? You know. I was invited, but it's Shabbos. You know, I said, who's gonna? What am I gonna do? You know. I watched this morning on CNN. They rebroadcast. Wonderful. I mean, he break the. No. Elton John was there. Oprah was there, right? Serena Williams was there. The Clooneys, she was there. Woo. Amazing. So listen, we want to wish them happiness. This kid has had a lot of tsuris in his life, so we want to give him a lot of happiness, and we hope that they have a long and happy life together. And amen. Time will tell. Right. Nina said, my wife is giving me commentary in the morning. She's, of course, an expert in these things, So she said, he's never going to be king because there's 6 people ahead of him, 5 people ahead of him. So he can do whatever he wants. What?
Unless he takes a page
Yeah, well, but it's an interesting job being a prince, Epis, don't you think? It's you run around doing good mitzvahs, it's a nice thing. Anyway, so if anybody knows the royal couple, if you have connections with them, if they ever made it to Encino, we would be glad to give them an aliyah. We call this, in the Persian tradition, you call it a Shabbat Chatan. In the Ashkenazic tradition, you get an aliyah before your wedding called an ufruf, when you invite the community to the wedding. In the Persian tradition, you come back a couple of weeks or months after the wedding, and you have a Shabbat Chatan. It's a beautiful custom. Family brings candy, we sing candy, and we bless the couple. So if you know, if you know Herschel and Malka, and you want to invite them to take an aliyah, we'll give it. It won't be calling a Levi, but we'll give him an aliyah. And sorry, what? She's from here. She grew up here. Yeah, Taka. She Megan from a local girl makes good. Marries the King of England. Can you imagine? Who would have thought? Who could have imagined? Yeah. The hats. Did you see the hats? Who knew that the whole Goyish world's becoming Orthodox? They're all wearing hats. Did you see these hats? There was a whole thing on CNN this morning about the hats, because you have to wear. It's called a fascinator. It's a yarmulke. It's what it is. But all with veils and with feathers and with the schmitchiks. And my only thought, I'll tell you how small I am, because I remember going to shul, as a kid, doing this. Like, who's the poor schnook who has to sit behind her? And you imagine some guy gets an invitation to the royal wedding, And he gets there like, you got to get there 3 hours in advance, and he has this terrific seat, and in front of him sits this lady with an epis, a hat, could you take it off, move it to the side, But they're beautiful. So I think this is a new custom we have to take up. Come on in. We're just schmoozing here. It's just fun. Anyway, so we wish the couple a lot of joy. We wish all of Britain a great joy. Apparently, there's parties. So the first party is Prince Charles gives a party for the couple, and that's formal and sweet. And then it goes on from there. It gets less formal as the night goes on. Yeah, Sheva Brachas. That's exactly Sheva Brachas, right? Harry has a reputation. He's apparently a party guy. So, 3 o'clock in the morning, he's in some pub in some neighborhood in London, doesn't know where he is. So we wish them. All right. Anyway, we wish them great happiness. Yeah, a lot of people. Local. Yeah, everybody got to see the thing, right? Should have invited his rabbi, but I'd have given a different drasha.
There was some guy.
Yeah.
With a funny kind of a hairdo.
Yeah.
That did a bullhead also. Does anybody know?
Well, they had the Archbishop of Canterbury does the wedding, and then they had the chief of the Episcopal Church in America gave the drasha, right?
And then who was that next?
I don't know. I'll have to find out. We'll have to find out. The guy with the streimel. Okay. Who read Torah, right? Anyway, in real announcements. So welcome. It's good to see everybody. Shabbat shalom. Following our Torah study today, there's a bar mitzvah, a wonderful bar mitzvah, Rastigar bar mitzvah. There's meditation. There's lunch, of course, and Parsha study this afternoon. That's tonight. This Parsha study. No Parsha study. Sorry. Okay. Tonight, the holiday of Shavuot begins. Today's the last day of the Omer. Shavuot begins tonight. The tradition in the community, of course, is that on the opening night of Shavuot, we have a tikkun, which is a gathering for learning and sharing Torah. So we'll begin tonight. For those, please come. It'll be a lovely night. We begin at 7 o'clock, and the theme tonight is about Moshe, about Moses, his life and leadership. We'll be learning together. Good morning. We'll be learning together at 7. Just before 8 o'clock, we'll go into the sanctuary in Daven Mariv and make Kiddush. And then I'll have a few words with Sergio, who is our court composer. And Sergio has created an oratorio, which is like an opera, on the life of Moshe. And he's going to be presenting the second half of it, which is Mount Sinai to the end of the story, and with choir and orchestra. And it's a midrash, a celebration of the life of Moshe. So please come. It's a wonderful musical presentation. We'll have some good learning. And then following all of that, of course, the tradition is to have blintzes. So we'll be having blintzes. And then those who'd like to stay late, Rabbi Farkas has Torah Tikkun late night, beginning at 10 o'clock. And he'll go from 10 till about 11:30, about midnight tonight. Those who want to study late with the rabbi, okay? Tomorrow, Sunday and Monday, the holiday of Shavuot, services at 9:30 in the morning, and services in the evening, those who want to make minyan. On Monday, we have Yisker, should be about 11:15 in the morning. On Monday, the fourth graders are coming to read Torah for us, and they're going to present us. They've been working on a project on hunger, and they're about to go to Sacramento to talk to the legislators about hunger in Los Angeles and California, and they're going to present that project to us on Monday morning. In addition, so that everybody gets this straight, as we're building the new building here, you know it's going up right over here. One of the processes that had to happen is they had to change the electric supply to the campus, to Valley Beth Shalom. The electric supply used to be just behind Malcolm Burdorf, and they had to put in a bigger transformer and move it to the end of the campus. So that meant unplugging Valley Beth Shalom for 2 days. And those 2 days will be Sunday, Monday. So we will have generators on the parking lot that will run air conditioning and lights and microphones for the service, but the rest of the campus will be closed because there'll be no electricity on Sunday, Monday. And we're asking people, when you come to shul for Yontif, just wear comfortable clothes. You don't have to dress up too much, and don't wear anything too warm because we will have the doors open, we'll have fans, and if we need the air conditioning, we're trying to keep it off because it uses a lot of power. So there'll be no electricity. There will be lights in the bathrooms, so you can use the bathrooms, but we're going to ask people not to wander around the rest of the campus because there's no lights and no electricity. Okay? So please, but join us. But do come and daven with us. It'll be nice. We're going to daven like we did for the first 3,500 years of Jewish history, without electricity. Okay? All right. Any other announcements this week? What else is going on in the community this week? Well, in any case, we thank you for come tonight. Good learning, and come over the holiday. Okay? This morning we begin a new book of the Torah, the book of Bamidbar. We finished Leviticus, and as we're getting closer to the summer, Bamidbar is the summertime book. Now, if you don't have to open it. I'll tell you what's in it. The book of Bamidbar begins. The first Torah portion is the census of the Israelites. In English, it's called Numbers because that's what the first section is. It's completely just the census of the Israelites. And it's read tribe by tribe, clan by clan, family by family. Gives you the name of the tribe, the clan, and the number of Israelites that are in that tribe. And so while it's an important piece of information because it signals the end of the Sinai time and the beginning of the second half of the journey. From Egypt to Sinai, and now from Sinai to Eretz Yisrael, to the Eretz Canaan. Whenever you begin a journey, you take a census to make sure you know who is with you. You take a census. So this is the census that arrives at the number 602,000 Israelite men between the ages of 20 and 50 who are ready for military service to conquer the land of Canaan. It's an important Torah portion in terms of the larger narrative. It's dreadfully boring to read. However, what's wonderful is that the Haftarah, the prophetic section that is read this morning, is remarkable. It's a fascinating prophetic section from the prophet Hosea. So this morning I thought we would take our learning and devote it to that, and more generally to the question of prophecy, of who is the prophet and what is the prophet and what are the concerns of the prophets and what did they accomplish. So if you can put away the Chumash and take out the page that I passed around. Okay? If you define prophecy as a person who talks with God, or brings the message of God into the world, then in a certain way everybody in the Bible is a prophet. But prophet, when we talk about the Navi, the prophet as a specific role, that belongs to a specific historical moment in the history of the people Israel. First, let's talk literature. This might seem really simple, but I want to make sure everybody understands this. The Hebrew Bible is set out in 3 sections, right? We call it Tanakh. Scott, welcome. You're here. Whoa! Yay! About half of you. Come in and sit. You get the front row.
All right. I can't fall
Ladies
asleep.
and gentlemen, the president of the congregation,
Yeah, he's back.
40 pounds lighter with a new liver. Wow. Wow. And you have two mazel tovs.
Yes.
Your daughter received her master's degree in social work at SC,
that I
and your
went
son graduated yesterday.
Yes.
Your son graduated from George Washington University in Washington,
I
D.C.
saw it on screening.
And you and I were both invited to the royal wedding, but we decided to come to shul
This is
instead.
more important.
I know. There you go. Here, take one of these. The Hebrew Bible is divided into three sections: Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Torah, prophets, writings. Torah, the first 5 books of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible is the 5 books of Moses, from Genesis to Deuteronomy. Tells the story of the creation of the world, the creation of humanity, the choosing of the Israelite people, their journey to Egypt, their exodus from Egypt, and the Torah ends just as we're about to enter Eretz Canaan. Moses dies, and just as we're about to step over the River Jordan, it ends, and we roll it back to the beginning and start all over again. That's the first 5 books of Moses. The next section of the Tanakh, of the Hebrew Bible, is divided into 2. It's called prophets, but it's divided into 2 because there's 2 different kinds of books there. The first 4 books are historical books that tell the story of, number 1, Israel's conquest of Eretz Yisrael, of the land of Israel, and the settlement in the land of Israel. The period just after the conquest, before the rise of kingship, when we were ruled by spontaneous warriors called judges. Then the book of Samuel, which is divided into 2 because it's a long book, tells the story of the rise of kingship. The first king of Israel is Saul. The next king of Israel is David. And it ends with the Davidic kingdom and the death of David. And then we have 2 books called Kings. And the books of Kings tell us the story of the monarchy, the time of kingship, the monarchy period, from the rise of Solomon. And then after Solomon's death, the Jewish kingdom splits into 2, northern and southern. Northern kingdom is ruled in Samaria. Southern kingdom is ruled in Jerusalem. Yes, it's true. Not just synagogues, but the whole Jewish country once split. Right? In other words, there was a country I live in and a country I wouldn't be caught dead in, right? Right? Seriously, there were 2 Jewish kingdoms, and they were rivals with each other. The northern kingdom prospered and was powerful and very visible on the world map. The southern kingdom remained quiescent for most of its period, most of its time. And then, at the end of the book of Kings, the geopolitical environment changes. And what happens is that the empires of Mesopotamia rise. And first we have the empire of Assyria, Ashur. This is what today is called Mosul. And the great empire of Assyria rises, and in order to control the world, the Assyrian empire seeks to control the highway that stretches between Mesopotamia and Egypt. So they come across the Fertile Crescent, conquering and subduing all the kingdoms along that highway. That's where we live. Yes, it's true. God put us literally in the world's most dangerous neighborhood. When the northern kingdom of Israel tries to resist the Assyrians, they're destroyed in 722 BCE, before 0. And as a way of pacifying the land, that is empire control of the land, what the Assyrian Empire does is take the leading citizens of that kingdom back to the empire, back to the imperial capital in Assyria, and settles a garrison of foreign soldiers in the town. The community that was taken away to exile in Assyria disappears from history. They assimilate into the life of the great Assyrian Empire, and that's what's known as the 10 lost tribes. Meanwhile, when the Assyrians get to Jerusalem, which is the next kingdom down the road, they don't manage to conquer it. What happened was there was a coup d'etat back in the imperial capital, and the emperor had to go back and reclaim his throne from his son who tried to take over. And so Jerusalem survives the Assyrians for another 150 years. But the next great kingdom to arise is Babylon. And Babylon repeats the same story. They want to conquer the highway. They come to Jerusalem. Jerusalem capitulates. They put a governor in Jerusalem, a guy named Gedaliah. But after a decade and a half of rule by Gedaliah, the people of Jerusalem become restive, and they rise up and they kill Gedaliah. They revolt against the emperor, and then the Babylonian emperor Nebuchadnezzar comes and destroys Jerusalem. The tribes of the people who live in Jerusalem are also exiled, this time back to Babylon. But this community has a different talent. They survive, and they return once the Babylonians are subdued by the Persians. The story of Israel, from its conquest to the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem, is the story from the book of Joshua, the book of Judges, the book of Samuel, and the book of Kings. The book of Kings ends with the destruction of Jerusalem. So far, so good? Okay, now, during the time of the book of 2 Kings, which is the time when, 2 Kings, it's the time of after the split of the kingdom, there arises both in the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom a cast of characters called prophets. Prophets have a particularly interesting role in this society. They're not just speakers of God's word, they're social critics, social activists, political activists, teachers of religion. And this apparently there were not just individuals, but there was a class of people. There were schools of people that did this. And they have an active role in the political life, both of the north and the southern kingdom. After the destruction of the southern kingdom, the words of these prophets are gathered up and published. And we have them. And there are 4 principal collections of the words of the prophets, and that forms the second half of the second part of the Hebrew Bible called prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then an anthology of 12 shorter prophetic books, right? And they're all collected. So you have 4 basic collections. And these are people who lived in the same historical period, probably knew about each other, and have a very special role in the social, religious, and political life of that kingdom. Okay, that's the second part of the Hebrew Bible. Now, quickly, the third part of the Hebrew Bible is called writings. Writings is my mother's garage, right? It's all the stuff that was too good to throw away, but not good enough to bring into the house. So it's all these books that we collected that were inspired, they were godly, they had important things to say, but they didn't make prime time. Psalms, the great books of prayers, Proverbs, the book of Job, the 5 Megillot that we read on holidays, Esther, Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, and Kohelet, right? The book of Chronicles, which is the royal records of the history, books of Ezra and Nehemiah that tell us the story of the restoration of Jerusalem after the Persian conquest of Babylon. This is all in the end of the Hebrew Bible. So today what we're looking at are prophets. In synagogue, every Shabbos morning we read a section of the 5 books of Moses, section of the Torah, the weekly Parsha. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, the rabbis of the Talmuds took a section of the prophets that had the similar kinds of themes or linguistic cues, and they assigned it to each weekly Torah portion. It's read after the weekly Torah portion. It forms the closing scriptural lesson after the Torah portion, and so it was given the word haftarah, which means closing scriptural section. Okay? There actually was a third section that was added as well from the section called writings, so that every Shabbat you were supposed to get a shtickle Torah, a piece of prophets, and something from the writings, and over the course of a year you'd gain some literacy. But that third tradition of the writings, that got lost in certain circles and isn't of the same authority as having a Torah and a Haftorah. So this morning, the Torah lesson comes from Numbers, but the Haftorah comes from Hosea, which is one of the 12 small prophets, minor prophets. Is that all clear? Yeah. Did anybody miss any of that? Any questions about that? Yes?
The 4 prophets were in the era of before Jerusalem was destroyed?
Yes,
okay.
Except for 3. 3 of the 12 prophets. Now, we call them minor prophets. They were neither underage, nor were they unimportant, nor were they small. It just happens to be that their books were smaller. Remember that in the ancient world, when you wrote a book, you wrote 1 sheep's worth of book. A book fit on the skin of one sheep, right? That's why if you have a long book, you have to get 2 sheep, right? The book of Samuel, the book of Kings, had to be divided across 2 sheep because it was too long, right? There wasn't 2 Samuels. There was just one guy named Samuel, but his book was 2 sheep's worth. Okay? Now, a sheep is an expensive proposition, as you well know, right? Right. So if I have a short book, I'm not going to waste a whole sheep on a short book. I'm going to gather 12 short books and stick them all on one sheep. So that's why the 12 minor prophets, this means the books are short, okay? Among those 12 prophets are 3, okay, who prophesied after the destruction of the temple and during the return when the Persians allowed the Jews to come back, okay? Right? And so they're prophets of the restoration. Apparently, sections of Isaiah also are post-exilic prophecy. See, the book of Isaiah, only the first section was actually written by Isaiah. The second and third sections written by a different guy named Isaiah. Oh, come on, guys, that was good. Right? Isaiah refers to a school of prophets that have a certain point of view. Jeremiah was all written by Jeremiah. We know that. He was wordy. Okay? Ezekiel is written by Ezekiel. Okay? Does that make some sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Yes, please. Yes. Vic, one time. Yeah.
Yeah, how is it that certain sections of the Haftorah...
Come in. Don't stand in the hallway. Don't block up the hall. Come on. Get in here. I don't know who you are, but get in here. We have room. This is a happy shul. We have more Jews than seats. How you doing? It's great to see you. Come in. Yes, Shabbat Shalom. Yes.
How were the sections in the Haftorah connected to the Torah?
Great question. I don't know. If you open the Chumash, our red Chumash called Eitz Chaim, which was created by the conservative movement 20 years ago, before each Haftorah gives you a little précis of what the Haftorah is about, and the last section is relation to the Torah portion. And they will tell you that sometimes it's thematic, sometimes it's linguistic. There's a word, right? Sometimes, for example, next week's I can tell you how it's connected. Next week we have the Parsha of Naso, okay? Naso happens to contain the laws of the Nazir, which are holy ascetics, people that swore off alcohol, didn't get haircuts. The most famous Nazir is a lunatic named Samson. So his birth story is the Haftorah, because the whole law of the Nazir is in the Torah portion. And other sections, for example, the story of the revelation on Mount Sinai, when God gives us the Torah on Mount Sinai. In Yitro, the Haftorah is Isaiah's revelation, Kadosh, 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 when Isaiah had this dream that he entered heaven. Sometimes it's very connected, and sometimes you got to go looking for the connection. Right? But what happened is the rabbi sat down and they wanted you to have a section of the prophets every single week, just like you have a section of the Torah. So they took a shtickle of the prophets and gave it to you each week. And that's how they did it. Now, one of these days, when I become chief rabbi of Ali Beth Shalom, what we're going to do is we're going to redo them. Because some of them make a lot of sense. But if your goal is to give the Jewish people the greatest hits of the prophets, some of the choices are unfortunate. Some of the Haftorahs are kind of awful. So what I'd like to do is redivide them and give us different ones. In fact, different years give us different ones, so that over the course of a year of coming to shul, you'd actually read a lot of the prophets. Because unfortunately, some of the best part of the prophets doesn't make it into the Haftorahs. Does that make some sense?
Yes.
So when did this all occur?
When did it occur? First century BCE, second century, 100 BCE to 200 CE, around there. One of the reasons we know this is kind of interesting. There's a book in the New Testament, the Christian Bible, called Matthew. Matthew likes quoting prophets. And if you look at Matthew, you realize that most of the prophets he's quoting are Haftorahs. I mean, only about a third or less than a third of the prophetic corpus, the prophetic sections, make it into the Haftorahs, but Matthew invariably quotes Haftorahs. So that tells you two things. One, he was talking to Jews who went to shul. Two, that the Haftorahs had already been divided by then, by the time he wrote his book, which is somehow in the middle of the 2nd century. Okay? That's right. Yes, Vin.
Speaking of your two supposed Isaiahs,
Yeah.
in the NBA there was an Isaiah.
Yeah. There's two guys named Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah,
Because his mother named him for her. The family's name was Thomas, and she decided to name her son Isaiah Thomas in honor of the first Isaiah Thomas. That's why Babe Ruth Feinstein is coming. I mean,
Exactly, but I think they're spelled a little differently somehow.
somehow. Okay, that's true. All right, good. So now, having told you all of that, let's take a look at who these prophets are. Because the idea of what is a prophet and what does he do? And here's the interesting question of the prophets. What does it mean to say I'm a prophet? What does it mean to say God spoke to me? If the prophet is only a vessel for God's word, then all the prophets should sound alike. I mean, if the prophet's just a ventriloquist dummy sitting on God's lap and God's talking through the mouth of the prophet, then all the prophets should sound alike, but they don't. And this is what's remarkable, that what happens is the prophet is the words of the prophet is a meeting point between the individuality of the prophet and his or her own circumstance and condition and experience and the word of God. And it's that meeting point that makes the prophet so very interesting. If anybody would like to study this in depth, which I recommend you do, it's great. The most wonderful book is a book by, of all people, Abraham Joshua Heschel. This was his doctoral thesis. It was translated into English in 1960, and it's called The Prophets. And the best if you have to read just one small section, the opening chapter is called What Sort of Man is a Prophet? What manner of man is the prophet? It's a wonderful, wonderful section. So let's take a look at two prophets who were contemporaries, but who come at the world from very different places. The time is the 8th century, the 700s. Okay? Now you know that the northern kingdom is going to be destroyed in 722, so I've just given away the end of the story. But before that happens, the ruler between 780 something and 740 something is a man named Jeroboam II. He's the ruler in Samaria, and this was the high point, the zenith of Samaria. Samaria is the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom is a center for trade. The northern kingdom has formed alliances with all of the local kingdoms. The northern kingdom is prosperous. Now we know this not only from the record in the Bible, but archaeology has now, we've dug up Samaria. You think about a city with boulevards, with beautiful palaces on both sides of the boulevards, with marketplaces that were substantial. I mean, you can measure the prosperity of a kingdom by the size of its marketplace, right? Big marketplace means there's a lot of commerce going on. So this was a very wealthy, very well-connected, very powerful kingdom. Very powerful kingdom. And if you were to go visit that kingdom, somebody who lived there would take you on a walk and show you the beautiful palaces, show you the beautiful boulevards, show you the vibrant marketplaces, and say, oh, what a wonderful place is this kingdom. Look how God has blessed our kingdom. Look how God has blessed our kingdom. And into this kingdom come these two men. They come from very different backgrounds. Amos is a southerner. He comes from Tekoa, and he's a farmer. He's a dresser of sycamore trees. He has orchards. And he somehow gets this prophetic bug, and he wanders north to Samaria. So you got to imagine, and farmer, and I just like imagine, tall, bald, like the guy from American Gothic, right? Wearing overalls, a hick. Beverly Hillbillies, right? And he walks into this vibrant marketplace, and he starts preaching. I didn't give you the whole chapter, but I'll tell you how it goes because you can see most of it here, right? So you ever watch a street preacher? Anyone ever been to Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park, London? This is the coolest thing. Whatever you have to say, you go to Speaker's Corner, you stand up literally on a box, people come and hear you and they heckle you. Right? Or what's a better example, I think, is a street busker. Anyone ever been down to the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica? You see the guys that juggle and the guys that dance and you watch them. I love watching these guys. It takes real talent. I mean, it's, to stand on the stage of the Hollywood Bowl is great, but people are paying attention to you. What do you do in the middle of a shopping mall when you want people to pay attention to you, right? So how do you gather a crowd? So who are the first people to come around? Little kids. right? So the guy's juggling, I'm just watching this guy juggling, and little kids come over, right? And look, he's like, little kids just watching him, and the guy's juggling, and he sees the kid, and I'm watching, he's just so sly. And one of the moves of the juggling is he hands the rubber ball to the kid, right? He says, just do this, right? And pretty soon, people come around watching. It's just the most amazing thing to watch him gather a crowd. All right, so here's the scene. You ready? It's a busy market day in Samaria, and into this market comes this hick, the guy in overalls, speaks with a southern accent, right? Because he's from Tekoa, Y'all gather around. I got something I want to say, right? And he starts preaching, right? And he's talking about he's talking about the enemies of Israel. He says, "Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, for 4 I will not revoke it, because they thresh Gilead with threshing boards of iron. I will send down fire on the palace of Hazael." Now, who's Damascus? That's Syria. That's our neighbor, right, to the north and the east. And a few people gather around to hear Preacher Man, right? And they say, "Oh, Damascus, those people are disgusting. Preachers, preach it. God is going to take his revenge on the enemies of Israel and destroy Damascus." So a few people are watching him. And as he keeps going, now what's missing here are the next 6. He does 7 in a row. For 3 sins of Moab. Those are our neighbors to the south. And for 4, I will not revoke it. And he mentions the sins of Moab. And the crowd gets a little larger because Moab, I hate those Moabs. Fire! Preach it, preacher, preach it! For the sins of Ammon. Who is Ammon? Ammon is Iraq. Right? For those, and he gives the sins of Ammon. For the sins of the Amorites. For the sins of Lebanon. And each time he mentions another one of these nations, the crowd gets a little rowdier and a little bigger. Right? Because as he mentions one of the nations that are our neighbors that we never liked, the crowd goes, "Yeah, preach it, preacher." And pretty soon he has a big crowd around him. And he's on a roll. You ever hear a good preacher on a roll? If you watch the sermon this morning, right, the African-American bishop, the Episcopal bishop who gave the sermon at the wedding, about halfway through you realize this guy's on a roll. This could go a while, he cut it short. He cut it short with that Chardon quote, but it goes where he's talking about fire, right? It was great. It was great. So I'm just sitting there thinking, what's the Queen thinking, right? This is like super proper people who are so spiritually constipated, right? And here's this guy just preaching the gospel, and all the Americans in the audience going, "Right on," And she's going, "When is this going to end?" Does he know no? Well, yeah, right. Does he know no propriety? Because you think that in a minute he's going to call her out. That's what he's going to do. The rich and the powerful down. No, that's us. Like shut up. But this is he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? He goes Damascus, Moab, Ammon, Amorites, Lebanon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then he says Judah. And the crowd goes, "Yeah, that's preach it, preacher. How will God take down the Judah? Wait a minute. I have cousins in Judah. Jews are brothers, right?" And he says, "For 3 transgressions of Judah." Judah's the 7th one. I took out the middle 6 for you, right? The 7th. "For 4 I will not revoke it, because they have spurned the teachings of the Lord and have not observed his laws. They are beguiled by the delusions after which their fathers walked. I will send down fire upon Judah and devour the fortress of Jerusalem." And the crowd goes, "What? You can't do that." And then the 8th one, and the number is on purpose. 7 is the number of completion. 8 is, oh yeah, and one more. Now I think the preacher gets quiet, I think. "For 4 transgressions of Israel." Wait a minute, that's us. What do you mean God's going to judge us? That can't be right. God's on our side. God protects us. God's the reason we're so, right? "For 4 I will not revoke it." This is the first theological point of the prophet. The prophets were the ones who moved us from a tribal religion to a universal religion. From a tribal God who is our God who is on our side, God who fights for us, God who blesses our kingdom. God who gives us our prosperity. Why? Because we're the chosen of God. To a universal moral God who holds everyone account for their activities, according to a universal moral sense. And the idea that God doesn't bless us because we're chosen, God judges us because we're chosen. That this is a judging God who is, number one, universal. The jurisdiction of this God has no boundaries. This God judges everyone, and every nation of the world will be judged according to its internal morality. And you, Judah, and you, Israel, you will be judged according to a higher standard, the Torah standard. This is the first time that Jews are told they're going to be judged by a higher standard. Yes, it's a double standard world. You know why? Because you're the chosen people. And chosenness doesn't mean you have privilege. Chosenness means you have a higher moral expectation. And you know what? This was not a popular idea. I would much rather believe that God protects us. God does what we want God to do. But that's exactly the prophet's notion. You can't manipulate God. You can't buy off God. And your chosenness is not prerogative or privilege or special standing. Your chosenness means you're judged. So here's the law. For 3 transgressions of Israel. Now the crowd gets quiet because that's us. What's God going to do to us if God's going to do that to all the other kingdoms? Because they sold for silver those whose cause was just, and the needy for a pair of sandals. Prophet, wait a minute. Prophet, what are you saying? Prophet, we're not immoral. We're not killers and butchers like those people in Damascus. We're not child rapers like those people in Gaza. We're not now, then, right? Maybe now, I don't know. We're not immoral like the people of Lebanon and the people of Ammon and the people of the Amorites and the Moabites. And the prophet says that's not your standard. You know what your standard is? You're judged by the status of the most vulnerable in your society. You've sold the needy for a pair of sandals. Imagine that, right? And he goes on, right? You who trample the heads of the poor into the dust of the ground and make the humble walk a twisted course. Father and son go to the same girl and thereby profane my holy name. Right? This is urban anonymity allows for something which never existed in village culture. In village, remember who is Amos? He's a village person. YMCA. He lives in a small town. In a small town, you don't have prostitution because everybody knows everybody else. You can't sleep with that girl. You dated her mother in high school, right? And everybody, there's no anonymity. But in a big city, you can have anonymity. In a big city, you have anonymity. So you use a woman. Now, why is she selling her body? Because she's poor and needs to feed her children. So the obscenity of prostitution and the obscenity that a father brings his son to the same prostitute. There's just no shame. There's no shame in any of this, right? They recline, this is the best one. They recline by every altar on garments taken in pledge. You used to play this game of what's the worst sin you can commit? Eating a ham sandwich on the bima, on Yom Kippur, you know. Here's what it is you take a garment in pledge. There's a law in Deuteronomy that says you're not to take the garment of a poor person in pledge. What's he going to sleep in that night? You strip a person naked. But not only do they strip the person naked, they use it as a cloth, and you have a picnic next to the altar on top of that garment. You're living on the humiliation of the poor. And in front of the altar, in front of God, you have no shame about your immorality. There's a particular thing about religious institutions. You'll see that in a moment, right? And drink in the house of God wines bought with fines they imposed. Yet I destroyed the Amorites before them. Amorites are the people they talk about Canaanites, who lived in the land before we got there, right? Why were the Canaanites dispossessed of Eretz Canaan? Because they didn't deserve to live in God's land. They didn't live up to the morality of the land. And I brought you up from Egypt and led you through the wilderness 40 years to possess the land of the Amorites. And I raised up prophets from among your sons and Nazarites from among your young men. Is it not so, people Israel? But you made the Nazarites drink wine. You violated their religious oaths. and ordered the prophets not to prophesy. So what's going to happen to you? Flight shall fail the swift, the strong shall find no strength, the warrior shall not save his life, the bowman not hold his ground, the fleet-footed not escape, nor the horseman save his life. Even the most stout-hearted warrior shall run away unarmed that day, declares the Lord. You're going to be destroyed. And you're going to be destroyed because the moral corruption of this people is going to make it unable to defend itself. Because without a moral core, you haven't got the strength to defend this land. Now, this was a message nobody wanted to hear. But you can hear where he comes from, right? This is a guy from a small farming village in the south, and he's standing in the big metropolis in all of its glory, and people are pointing out the beautiful avenues, the beautiful palaces, and he says, none of that concerns me, because that's not the measure of a society. The measure of a society is the social cohesion that's purchased with a common sense of justice. Lose that common sense of justice, there's nothing that holds this society together. This society is going to dissipate, and it's going to disappear. And they didn't want to hear this. So the next place he goes, well, there's an in-between, he goes to the social club, but the next place he goes is the altar. There's a shrine in Bethel, and he goes to the shrine of Bethel, because what really offends him is not just that this is what goes on in the marketplaces and in the political centers. This is what goes on in religion. That religion has come to sanction the sins of the powerful and their oppression of the weak. That religion has become the sanction. And he comes and he stands at Bethel and he begins to prophesy, and he's immediately called out by the priest of Bethel. It was a man named Amaziah. And this confrontation between Amos and Amaziah is one of the famous and most remarkable confrontations in the Bible. Because here you have the farmer prophet speaking on behalf of the poor and pointing out the corruption of the society. And here you have the priest who was the royal priest. He's the royal priest. He's appointed by the king. He's an agent of the government. Telling him, look, I'm doing the rites and rituals according to the book of Leviticus. I'm doing everything right. Who are you to call us out? And who are you to speak for God? Who speaks for God? Who speaks for God? You're a false prophet. I mean, this is not the first time in history that a political leader calls out a critic as fake news. This is an old, I'm not kidding. This is an old trope. If you're a fake prophet, who are you? I'm Amaziah. I'm the king's priest. Who are you? Who are you? And this confrontation is very, very important. And you got to get one more thing in mind, which is there was nothing in Samaria that was grossly immoral. They were not destroying. Let me put it a different way. Every urban society has a certain quality of what we would call moral corruption and evil that all of us have gotten used to. We've gotten used to it. Remember the first time you saw a guy on a freeway off-ramp with a big sign that says, "We'll work for food"? I remember the first time I saw it, middle 1980s, came home from New York. I see this there. My kid was in the back of the car, and he says, "Abba, who's that man?" And I couldn't keep my eyes on it. In New York, we had panhandlers. In New York, we had beggars. In New York, it was a big, ugly, grimy eastern city. Here in L.A., especially in the Valley, you never had any of that. This was, clean L.A., and all of a sudden you have beggars on freeway off-ramps, right? So the first time I saw that, I was like transfixed. That can't be right. So yeah, I gave him a few dollars because, poor man, right? I don't know if you know this, but he's proliferated. He's everywhere now. He has children and children's children, and whole families now live on freeway off-ramps. Yeah, but you see, this is, there's something, the first time you see it, you're shocked. The 20th time you see it, you don't even see it anymore. Every society has a certain quality of natural, normal evil that we live with. A certain quality of normal evil that we live with, right? And in the South, if you watch those movies like The Help or Hidden Figures, in the South in the 1950s, 40s, 50s, 60s, racial discrimination, racial prejudice, right? It's not that these people were viciously immoral. That's just the way Southern society was, right? You had separate public facilities for black folks and separate public facilities for white folks. And of course, if a black person got on a bus, they went to the back. That's where the black folks sit. And the white folks sit in the front. It wasn't immoral, it was normal. Right? It was normal. That was normal. Then all of a sudden, someone opens our eyes and says, don't you understand what you're doing? And suddenly you open your eyes and it's hard. At first you don't want to know it. You don't want to, you push back, right? What is the prophet calling out? He's not calling out gross social evil. He's calling out all of the normal rhythms of society that cause human suffering that the rest of us have gotten so used to, we don't even see it. You don't even see it. You don't even pay attention to it. You don't understand what it's like. Right? You don't understand. And let me give you one, which you all have read about. And I know that you're going to push back hard, but just listen for a moment. Right? I have an African-American friend who has a teenage kid. And he says to me, my kid just got his driver's license. So I sat him down and I told him, what do you do if you're stopped by a cop? I said, listen, the chances he said, I know, statistically, the chances of my kid getting hurt by a cop are not. He said, but I'm afraid. So he taught his kid, if you're stopped by a cop for whatever reason, you keep your hands on the steering wheel, you call the man sir, you act. He taught his kid how you go through a traffic stop. He said, because I'm terrified that my kid's going to end up like one of those kids on CNN. Now, you and I looked at him and I said, I'm so sad for you. You know, I never taught my kid how to do that. You know, if a cop stops you, you talk to a cop. Yeah, all of us have been stopped by police officers, right? But none of us feel what this parent feels about his 16-year-old African-American kid. He said, look, my kid's a big kid. You know, he wears the clothing of 16-year-old African-American kid. I'm terrified if he gets pulled over by a cop. I mean, but now, you and I don't live that reality. And we have all the reasons why don't be afraid. You know, you don't live that reality. At least respect it for a moment, okay? At least respect it. You see the point? The prophet isn't calling out gross moral evil. He's calling out those rhythms of a society that cause people suffering. Because what my friend was telling me is, and he's sweet, and he's a good man, and he's not vindictive or angry. He's done very well, by the way. But he said to me, you know, what he's saying to me is, you're white. I'm black. I live in a different world than you do. I live in a different America than you do. And I'm done really well. I mean, this guy's done really well. I live in a different America than you do. Just at least understand that. You don't have to agree. I'm not talking about the politics of it. It's not about who we vote for. It's a question. Just understand that we live in a different world. Amos comes along and says, the poor live in a different world. Don't you understand that? You have created a different world for the poor and the rich, and that offends God. That's offensive according to the laws of Torah. So he stands in front of Amaziah, and he says, and you've sanctioned, you've blessed this. So Amaziah sends a message to the king saying, Amos is conspiring against you with the house of Israel. The country cannot endure the things he's saying. That's an interesting phrase, because this was a powerful country. Can one man, one farmer with one voice really shake the foundations of a political system? This is before mass media, by the way. You understand that Amos was not on Facebook yet, okay? The country cannot endure the things he's saying. For Amos has said, Jeroboam, the king, shall die by the sword, and Israel shall be exiled from its soil. And Amaziah then confronts Amos. Amaziah, who's the priest, says, Seer, be off with you to the land of Judah. Go home. Earn a living there. Do your prophesying there. Don't ever prophesy again in Bethel. It's the king's sanctuary and a royal palace. And Amos says to Amaziah, I'm not a prophet, and I'm not a prophet's disciple. I'm a cattle breeder and a tender of sycamore figs. I'm a farmer. There were apparently professional prophets. I'm just a farmer. But the Lord took me away from following the flock, and the Lord said to me, go prophesy to my people Israel. My people Israel. Now there's an intimacy between this people and God, but that intimacy has to be demonstrated with a certain quality of life. And so hear the word of the Lord. You say I must not prophesy about the house of Israel, preach about the house of Isaac, but this I swear is what the Lord said. Your wife will play the harlot in the town, your sons and daughters fall by the sword, your land be divided up with a measuring line, and you yourself shall die on unclean soil, for Israel shall be exiled from its soil. Nobody wanted to hear that. And then at the end, he's going to give us a little bit of something. Give us something a little bit at the very end, the very last chapter. If you look at the last paragraph here, right? He finishes with a prophecy of hope. He says, what's going to happen is we will go into exile. But exile will, if you look at the second to the last paragraph, verse 9, I will give the order and shake the house of Israel through all the nations as one shakes sand in a sieve. The purpose of exile is not to be vindictive. The purpose of exile is a purifying exercise. And not a pebble falls to the ground. All the sinners of my people shall perish by the sword. Who boast, never shall evil overtake us or come near us. But in that day I will set up the fallen house, the fallen booth of David. The fallen, Sukkot David Nofelet, is a bracha that we say on Sukkot, right? Because it represents the recreation, the resurrection of the house of Israel, of the people of Israel. I will mend its breaches, and set up its ruins anew. I will build it firm as of days of old. I will restore my people Israel. They'll rebuild ruined cities and inhabit them. They'll plant vineyards and drink wine. They'll till gardens and eat fruit, and I will plant them upon their soil, never more to be uprooted from the soil I have given them. Every prophecy ends with a note of hope. Prophets can be as viciously castigating as you can imagine, but they always end with a note of hope. They never end with doom. It's always, and there will be a resurrection. It will come, which is why these books were preserved. This is why these books were kept. Because when the destruction came, the question was, what happens? And they turned to these prophets to give them a sense of where they were in their own history. Yes, please.
If anyone can just stand up and say something,
Yeah.
why should anyone believe that God actually talked to this guy versus that guy versus that guy?
That's a great question. I got better questions for you. When he says, thus says God, what does he mean? What is the phenomenological experience? What does it mean? What is it? Did he hear a voice? Did he get an inspiration? What does he mean? There's a lot about these prophets we don't know. Are these all the words he wrote, or just the ones that were selected later, the greatest hits? Right? What did he do in his spare time when he wasn't prophesying? Did he go back to being a farmer, or did he hang around? Right? I mean, in other words, there's a lot about these guys we don't know because there's no corroborating evidence. All we have are the words of the Bible. And we can read inside and speculate about who these guys were and what they were doing and what it meant, but we don't have anything else. You have to use your imagination. Okay? So I honestly can't tell you. Right? I think personally, I mean, when I read these guys, I think that part of this experience is Heschel writes, let me tell you what Heschel wrote. Heschel writes that what the prophet does is he feels something emotional. There's this idea that God has pathos, God has feelings, and that God feels and has pathos and has empathy for the oppressed and the poor, and that he feels the power. If you and I were able to walk the world, and you see a homeless guy, and it's like Twilight Zone, for one split second to feel what that guy feels. You and I go home to nice warm homes, nice safe homes, nice warm beds. What's it like to sleep on the street? To feel the pain of the poor, to feel the oppression of the dispossessed. What's that like? Heschel says that's what that's what prophecy means. What gives them the charisma to make anyone listen to them? What gives them any authority to speak in the name of God? Here's something we do know. We do know that there were other prophets besides the ones that were written here. There's a very famous section in the book of Jeremiah where he shows up in the court of the king and says, you're doomed. And there's a court prophet. There's a court prophet And the court prophet says, no, I have a different prophecy. My prophecy is we're going to be triumphant. We're going to win. And Jeremiah says, never listen to a prophet who gives you good news. No, he says that. He says, because it's too easy to accept that. And the two of them go at it, and Jeremiah loses the argument. The other guy, his name is Hananel. He wins. He's much more charismatic. He's much more articulate. He's much more prophetic.
What constitutes winning?
Well, everyone believes him. Jeremiah loses the audience.
His name.
You ever watched on 3rd Street? You have some guy juggling, and then next to him, some guy's juggling fire. And right? I was listening to this gorgeous young woman sing this gorgeous young Irish folk songs. And then next to her was some guy banging on a drum. And everybody was listening to the drum banger. There's this girl who was a beautiful musician. Sometimes it's who's louder, right? I mean, it's a great question. I don't know. By the way, Hananel, he dies of a heart attack a year later. The Torah, the Bible puts that in. He says, oh, by the way, he dropped dead. He dropped dead a year later. So, there you go. But a year later, not on the spot, a year later, the guy was eating a lamb chop and I don't know, You can't justify the authority of a prophet at that moment. You got to wait 300 years. Right? In 300 years, I might actually become somebody. No, in the Jewish world, you're nobody till you're dead 300 years. So y'all come back, we'll find out. I want to do the other prophet today, so we're going to turn the page over now.
It's interesting that his name is Hananel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, this prophet Hosea is a contemporary, but he has a whole different world. He's a northerner. He comes from the city. But he comes from a different world than Amos does. And he sees the world through different eyes than Amos does. And he's also a prophet, but he has a different spiel, basically, a different complaint. And he's one of the most interesting prophets. The next section of our talk is rated R, X, PG, right? Because it's very interesting what he does. The word of the Lord came to Amos, son of Be'eri. When the Lord first spoke to Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go get yourself a wife of whoredom and a children of whoredom, for the land will stray from following the Lord. So he went and married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim. She conceived and bore him a son. And the Lord instructed him, name him Jezreel, for I will soon punish the house of Jehu. And it goes on. What happens? Once upon a time, ladies and gentlemen, there was an innocent man in an innocent world, and his name was Hosea. Also an interesting name, which means salvation, right? Hosea, Yehoshua, Jesus. And Hosea marries his high school sweetheart. I don't even know what her name is. She's called this, but this is not her name, I guarantee that. And they have a couple of kids, and they live a nice suburban life. And then one day, Hosea comes home from work, and he sees his wife putting on a very nice red dress and some sweet-smelling perfume and her high heel shoes and her nice pearls. And he says, honey, where are you going? And she says, I have a sick friend I have to go see. But I might be home late, so give the kids dinner, bathe them, put them to bed, and don't wait up for me. And his wife goes out, and she comes back 3 o'clock in the morning, and the dress is disheveled, and the eye makeup is disheveled, and the pearls are missing. And he says, honey, where have you been? And she says, oh, my sick friend, it was terrible. I spent the whole night with her. And this goes on. You can't hide your lion eyes. And pretty soon, Hosea gets it. His wife, who was his high school sweetheart, the girl of his dreams, the girl who had a nice middle-class life, for some reason turns into a nymphomaniac, a sex addict. No, I'm not kidding. She's a sex addict. Her name here is Gomer, which means to finish, which is the one thing she can't do. She's never finished. It's always this need for sexual adventure. She's Gomer bat Diblaim. Diblaim means double talk. Lies. That's not her name. I guarantee her name was Jennifer or Sharon or Chelsea or Cody or Mackenzie or something like that. But the idea, I mean, and here is daddy sitting at home with the 3 kids, right? And he knows, but he doesn't want to know. He knows, but he can't accept it. And at the same, and his rage begins to grow. And his rage begins to grow. And pretty soon he's out of his mind with rage. But it's not just pure rage. It's rage. And at the same time, it's longing for the girl that he loves. And it's anger at her for her betrayal. And it's feeling sorry because he knows that this can't end well. And he's angry at himself for being so stupid. And he feels sorry for himself for being alone. It's all this mix of emotions. And in the middle of all of this, the most remarkable thing happens. He comes to the conclusion that this is no accident. That he has been sent this circumstance in order to feel what God feels. God has been betrayed by the people Israel in the same way that Hosea has been betrayed by his wife. The people Israel, the northern kingdom, there's a couple of facts about the northern kingdom. Number one, they entered into all these alliances with the local kingdoms in order to create a bulwark against the rising Assyrian Empire. The way that you enter alliances, you marry the princess of the local kingdom. You bring the princess to live in the capital. She needs to bring her gods with her. So along the boulevards of Samaria were all of the temples to all of the gods of the princesses with whom we were allied. And the populace begins worshiping in those temples. So there's a political, religious sense of idolatry going on. Second thing, if you've ever been to Israel, you know that Jerusalem sits in the middle of the Judean desert. It's barren with rocks. There's a reason why monotheism was invented in Jerusalem. Because you get the sense that there's sky and land and nothing else. But when you go to the north, and you've ever been to the Galil, to the Galilee, it's lush, it's green, it's deciduous, it has seasons, it rains. You begin to feel the power of nature. Nature becomes the God you worship, and all of its changes, and all of its many manifestations. So it naturally leads to a certain sense of idolatry. And who was the principal idol of the north? Well, the Canaanite god of Baal. Because the problem was they needed rain to water their crops. And the Canaanites had a wonderful metaphor for this. The earth is the mother Asherah. And the sky is the rain god Baal. The mother Asherah, by the way, was always represented by a woman with a swollen, pregnant belly and large breasts. And Baal by the bull with the extended phallus. And how do you bring rain? How do you coax God Baal to rain his fructifying rain down on Mother Asherah? The farmer would take his wife, and sometimes not his wife, but a cultic prostitute, a woman whose job it was to help him do this, out to the fields. They would have sexual union, and at the moment of truth, he would pour his own seed onto the field, thereby coaxing magically Baal to do the same. Baal worship became very popular. The word Baal is the name of the god. In colloquial Hebrew, the word Baal means husband or lover, male lover, right? So for Hosea, the idolatry of the northern kingdom, the betrayal of loyalty to the God of Israel, that's the thing that's going to bother him. Amos was the social prophet. Hosea was the religious prophet. The betrayal of the God of Israel. And for Hosea, idolatry is spiritual adultery. It is the betrayal of your promise of loyalty and fidelity. Okay? So what happens? He begins raging, as a betrayed husband might rage, but he realizes that his rage is God's rage. That his experience is a metaphor for God's experience, and that his sense of brokenness inside, the brokenness of his marriage, is God's experience. So you have to read the entire book of Hosea as a double entendre. It's the prophet's personal experience of his unfaithful wife. You can't hide your lying eyes. And it's God's experience of a lying people. But it's that kind of strange experience of I hate you because I loved you, and you betrayed my love, and I still love you, but I hate you. So listen to that. You can hear it in there, right? Rebuke your mother. Rebuke her. Who's he talking to? The kids, right? The kids. You know, your mom's a whore, right? For she is not my wife, and take off the capital M. This is double entendre time, right? She is not my wife, and I am not her husband. Let her put away her harlotry from her face and her adultery from between her breasts. Else I strip her naked and leave her on the day as the day she was born. And I make her like a wilderness and render her like a desert land and let her die of thirst. Let me get my hands around that, I can't say it, throat, and I'll beat her. I mean, the fantasies of violence, right? Do you hear the rage? The fantasies of violence, right? I will disown her children, for they are a harlot's brood. As the kids are getting older, he notices they look an awful lot like the pool boy and the tennis pro. No, it's true. You know, anyone get one of those 23andMe things, right? You know, you're 50% Ashkenazic Jew and 50% Braemar golf pro. You know. 50% Latino pool boy, you know, right? In that their mother played the harlot, she conceived them, has acted shamelessly, because she thought, I will go after my lovers who supply my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink, the fertility gods of the Canaanites. But it's also his wife who goes out and takes presents from her lovers, right? Assuredly, I will hedge up her roads with thorns and raise walls against her, and she shall not find her paths. I don't want her coming home. I can't stand to see her again. She disgusts me. Pursue her lovers as she will not overtake them. And seek them as she may not find them. Then she will say, so there will come a day when they don't want her anymore. They don't want her anymore because she's become even too disgusting for them. Her lovers won't want her anymore. And then what's going to happen? Then what's going to happen to that? What's going to happen? Then she will say, I will go and return to my first husband. Then she's going to come crawling home to me, right? For I fared better than now. And she didn't consider this, that it was I who bestowed on her the new grain and wine and oil, and I who lavished silver on her and gold by which she used for the Baal. You know the pearls that she wore to go see her lovers? I gave her on her birthday. And the earrings and the Chanel number 5. I guess back then it was Chanel number 1, you know. I gave that to her as an anniversary present, and she wore it to go see her boyfriend. You see the rage here? You feel it? Assuredly, I will take back my new grain in its time and my new wine in its season. And I will snatch away my wool and my linen, and which serve to cover her nakedness. Now I will uncover her shame in the very sight of her lovers. None shall save her from me, and I will end all her rejoicing, her festivals and new moons and Sabbaths and all the festive seasons, right? She worships God. Israel worships God in this formal way, all the time betraying God with the other gods. So it says, someday I'm going to expose all of this and show everyone what a whore she is. Can I use that word? What a unfaithful woman she is, right? I will lay waste to her vines and her fig trees, which she thinks are a fee she received from her lover. I'll turn them into brushwood, right? And the beasts of the field shall devour them. Thus will I punish her for the days of the Baalim. You see the double entendre? Baalim means her lovers, and Baalim means the gods Israel is worshiping. On which she brought them offerings when decked with jewels and earrings. She would go after her lovers, forgetting me, declares the Lord. And you know what happens to a man who's really angry? So the guy's really angry, and he screams, and he screams, and he punches the wall, and he screams, and then all of a sudden it sort of burns out like a fire. You feel it? You got to feel the burnout, right? Just the rage is gone. and he plops himself down. He plops, and if he's talking to the kids, and they don't understand, like, why is Daddy so crazy? Like, Daddy, are you okay? Right? Right? And he says, no, that's not what I'm going to do. She'll come crawling back to me someday. And what will I do? Assuredly, I will speak coaxingly to her and lead her through the wilderness and speak to her tenderly. I will give her vineyards from there in the valley of Achor as a plowland of hope, where she respond in the days of her when she came up from the land of Egypt. What was the exodus from Egypt? The honeymoon. We'll have another honeymoon. See, now the anger is burned out, the rage is burned out, the destructive spirit is burned out, and all he says was, just bring her back to me. We'll figure it out. We'll go to counseling. You know? We'll figure it out, right? We'll have another honeymoon, right? We'll stick the kids with their mother and go to Catalina for a couple nights, right? And in that day declares the Lord, you will call me Ishi, my husband, and no more call me Baali. For I will remove the names of the Baalim from her mouth, and they shall never be mentioned by name. And that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the creeping things of the ground. I will banish bow and sword and war from the land, and then let them lie down in peace. Now he switches from the exodus from Egypt to the ultimate honeymoon, which was the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden will be one again. Man and God will be one again. I don't want her dead. I want her home. I want her loyal again. I'll show her how much I love her, and that will heal her infidelity. I'll forgive her. I'll bring her home. And this next section is so important because this is the section that's written as you put on your tefillin in the morning. Erastichli leolam. This is the section you say when you put on tefillin in the morning, and many of you have this written on your ketubah. It's kind of ironic, actually, right? And I will espouse you forever. Erastichli leolam. I will betroth myself. I will attach myself to you forever. And I will espouse you, from the word spouse. It's the verb for spouse. I will betroth, I will connect myself with you with righteousness and justice, with mercy and goodness. I will espouse you with faithfulness, and you shall be devoted to the Lord. In that day I will respond. I will respond. I will respond to the sky, and it shall respond to the earth, and the earth shall respond with new grain and wine and oil, and they shall respond to Jezreel, and I will sow her in the land of my own, and take Luchamer Loame back, and he will say, you are my people, and he will respond, you are my God. Right, Erastichli Leolam, this is where it's from. So what is Hosea? For Hosea, the sin was the disloyalty of the people Israel to the God that brought them to this land and planted. And that this God has given them all this prosperity, all this power, all this world, and not a moment of gratitude. In fact, as soon as they got the prosperity, where did they go? To other gods. And the betrayal, the sense of spiritual betrayal, Hosea gathers it in because it mirrors his own experience with his wife who has no fidelity to him. And so you get this love story between God and Israel, this passionate, deeply passionate love story played out in the life of this poor man whose wife is out one night someplace she shouldn't be. And that's today's Haftarah. That's today's Haftarah. Now, why is it today's Haftarah? It has almost nothing to do with the Torah portion, except what? Except it's going to be 73 degrees outside today. This is, in Israel, this is when winter's really over and springtime's beginning, right? And you'll begin to see flowers and trees blooming. This is all of this natural stuff, right? And as an expression of nature, do you see in nature all these gods of nature? Or do you see behind nature the God that has created the whole world? That's the question of the prophet Hosea. So you have two different prophets who have two very different, you see how the personal experience and the divine vision comes together in the idiom of the prophet. That's what makes the prophet so remarkable and unique. Any last questions, comments, counter sermons. Yes, please, David.
Aren't the prophet in a way the scientist to discover the existing phenomena of the society, like a scientist discovers something that is already there?
That's a wonderful point of view. David says maybe the prophet's like a scientist who has discovered. Yeah, I'm good. He says maybe the prophet's like a scientist who has discovered sort of the hidden reality of a society. I think it's partly that, to be able to open your eyes and see what nobody else can see.
Therefore, we do have
Right?
prophets even now.
Right. Well, the idea is that, the analogy is a wonderful analogy. In the same way, you can't see oxygen, but you can't live without it. And for a long time, we didn't even know what it was. Now we have a whole language for oxygen, right? So if you understand that there is, for Amos, a moral reality, a set of moral rules that underlies the sustaining of a society. If you stay with Hosea, that a sense of fidelity and loyalty to the God who has given you all the prosperity that you have gotten, and not the visible, but the invisible, then that's a certain way of, and that's what the prophet's job is. But there's one little secret about prophets. They all fail. The only reason they're in the book is because when they failed, and people said, why did this happen to us? There was a school of thinkers who had an answer. Because you violated the covenant. Because there is a set of rules to the universe that you fail to observe. The prophet says to you, listen to me, there are rules to this game, and if you violate them, bad things will happen. But the problem with human beings is that nobody prepares for a disaster before. It's only after the disaster that you say, "Oi, if only I had prepared before." And that's the prophet, that's the great tragedy of prophecy. Right? That's the great tragedy of prophecy. Right? If you'd only exercised and followed the diet I gave you, right? If you only had a flashlight in the house, these kinds of things, that's the great tragedy. Yes, please.
Is this somewhat related to the 10 Commandments that we have to follow?
Yeah, but you see, the problem with the 10 Commandments is that no one follows them, right? Like you say, yes, you put them on courthouses, or not anymore. You put them on, and it's only afterwards that you say, oh, now I understand what the consequences are to bad behavior. And this is, it's really hard to learn the consequences the first time. That's what it's only afterwards when truly bad things happen, you say, oh, now I get it, right? It's one of the unfortunate things about human beings, right? It's really hard. Because if the guy says, don't, if you do this, disaster will come, and we say, look, disaster didn't come, right? So you say, well, yeah, no kidding, Would you want to find out if it does? This becomes the issue. This is the failure of prophecy. Yes, please.
Did you skip over Genesis?
I skipped over a lot because I'm going to move through this very quickly. The top paragraph is the second half of the introduction here. This goes this way. It goes this way, right? I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloody deeds at Jezreel, put an end to the monarchy of the house of Israel. In that day I'll break the bow of Israel. And what he does is God tells him, rename your kids. Don't call your kids, Brett, and Cody, Mackenzie, Jennifer, right? Hunter, Parker, Tiffany, Crystal, Brett. Did I say Brett already? Donald, Name your kids Lo Ruchama, for I will no longer accept the house of Israel. I'll have no rachamim on Israel. And then name another kid Lo Ami, not my kids. So he gives his kids political names. He gives his kids political names. I can just imagine calling him in from lunch, Lo Ruchama, coming from, right? And then at the end of the prophecy, he says, I want you to rename your kid. Instead of calling him Lo Ami, I want you to call him Ami, which means they are my people. When the rage burns out and the prophecy turns from fantasies of revenge to promises of redemption, he renames the kids the opposite names. The opposite names. And they become prophecies of redemption, right? And that gives the prophecy a hope at the very end. Let's call it a day. Wish you all a very happy, good Shabbos, and Chag Sameach. Come back tonight for Moses, the musical. Yeah, go on the VBS website. and it says, go on the VBS website and find the little button for live streaming, and hit that button. When you get to the page about live streaming, it says archive. Hit that button, and then all of the archived live stream lessons are there. All of them. Yeah, I'll email it to you if you lose it, but I mean, go on to VBS, go to live stream, go to archive. Okay?
To secondary, you
hang
have
on.
your email.
Hang on a second. Let me just take this thing off. Thanks, guys.